The air on Corellia tasted of industry and ambition. A sharp metallic tang carried on winds that swept down from the shipyards of Coronet City. From the viewport of their assigned Lambda-class shuttle, Zara watched the geometric sprawl of the city grow larger, its skyline a forest of docking spires and administratum towers. This was the Empire's beating industrial heart, and they were being sent to perform fucking surgery on it. Beside her, Kael finished reviewing the mission brief on his datapad, his expression unreadable. "Governor Roland de Sol," he stated, his voice a low rasp. "Hero of the Clone Wars, pacified the Onderon insurrection. Decorated by Palpatine himself. Now suspected of siphoning shipyard resources, delaying TIE fighter production quotas, and possible sentimental affiliation with the Old Republic." He glanced at Zara, a dark smirk playing on his lips. "ISB intercepted fragmentary schematics for a new ion disruptor being routed through his office to that fucking terrorist Saw Gerrera." "A war hero turned sympathizer," Zara mused, her golden eyes scanning the city. She took a slow drag from a thin, elegant stem stick, letting the spicy smoke burn her throat before exhaling. "Or a pragmatist who sees the Empire for the grinding, soul-crushing machine it is." She caught his look and gave a faint, private smile. "Not that we'd ever say that shit aloud, Captain." "Of course not, Lieutenant," Kael replied, his hand casually brushing the inside of her thigh. "We are the very soul of Imperial loyalty. Efficiency and fucking order above all." Their cover was airtight. Captain Kael Wren and Lieutenant Zara Leston, hand-picked from the ISB's Rising Stars, assigned as temporary oversight liaisons to the Corellian Imperial Administration. Their stated mission: audit logistical efficiency and military preparedness. Their real mission: find proof of de Sol's treason and orchestrate a clean, quiet purge before it became a public scandal. And their private agenda, dictated by Kira: exploit the resulting power vacuum to plant Crimson Dawn assets deep within Corellia's new administration. And maybe skim a hefty percentage of the action for themselves? The shuttle docked at the Imperial Port Authority, a monolithic structure of gray durasteel. As they disembarked, the chill of institutional scrutiny hit them like a physical blow. Lines of stormtroopers stood at attention. Mid-level officers in gray uniforms watched with a mixture of curiosity and thinly veiled hostility. Zara, her Pantoran blue skin and striking golden eyes stark against the sea of human faces, felt every gaze like a predator sizing up prey. A colonel, a man with a pinched face and a chest full of meaningless campaign ribbons, stepped forward. "Captain Wren, Lieutenant Leston," he said her name like it was a foul taste. "I am Colonel Bran Selk. I'll be your liaison. Welcome to Corellia. We run a tight operation here. I trust your inspection will be brief and unobtrusive." Zara met his eyes, her posture impeccably rigid, a direct challenge. "Our inspection will be as thorough as necessary to ensure Corellia's output meets Imperial standards, Colonel. The duration depends entirely on your cooperation and how fast you can get your head out of your ass." Selk's face flushed. "You dare!" "I dare whatever the fuck my rank and my direct line to ISB High Command allows me to," Zara cut in, her voice dropping to a venomous purr. "Now, are we going to stand here and measure dicks, or are you going to show us to our office?" Selk's jaw worked silently before he spun on his heel. "This way." As they were led through sterile corridors, the whispers began. Not whispers, bold hissed asides meant to be heard. "Fucking alien in an ISB uniform? Thrawn's a fluke. This cunt's just a diversity hire. Probably sucks her way up the chain." Kael's hand, resting near his blaster, clenched until the leather of his glove creaked. Zara placed a subtle hand on his forearm for a half second, her fingers digging in. "Not yet. Save it." They reached their temporary office, a sparse room with a view of a docking bay. Once the door hissed shut, Kael turned, his calm veneer shattering. "I'm going to have that stuck-up piece of shit transferred to a garbage compactor on Mustafar." Zara shrugged off her greatcoat, revealing the crisp gray tunic beneath, cut to emphasize her form. "He's a gnat. Save the anger for someone who matters." She activated the holo table, inputting their secure codes. "First, we accessed de Sol's schedules, comm logs, and financials. Second, Kira gave us 3 contacts. People from her less reputable network. We see what they offer." Their investigation was a masterclass in cold, ruthless precision. By day, they were the model ISB team. They interviewed officers, audited supply manifests, and observed drills. Zara's genius for pattern recognition quickly identified discrepancies, shipments of hyperdrive motivators logged as damaged in transit that never arrived at the reclamation depots, surplus durasteel that vanished between inventories. They also played the long game with the sympathizers. Over cups of bitter calf that tasted of tar, a major in logistics, an older man who'd served with the Soul since the Clone Wars spoke wistfully of the days of the Republic Navy when we fought for ideals, not just for some Moff's hard-on for power. A young comms officer, her eyes bright with hidden fire, offered them a hit of glitteril from a hip flask during a late-night shift, making a barely veiled critique of the Tarkin doctrine between coughs. Zara and Kael played their parts perfectly. They offered sympathetic nods, spoke in lowered tones of understanding the transition, and seemed to bond over shared, cautious disillusionment. They gained trust, collected names, and recorded every seditious word, all while passing the flask back and forth. In the privacy of their secured apartment that night, Kael reviewed the recordings, his face lit by the blue glow of the datapad, a glass of Corellian whiskey in his other hand. "They think we're potential converts," he said, a dark amusement in his voice. "They're pouring their hearts out over cheap speed and cheaper ideals." "They're useful," Zara replied, stretching her sore shoulders with a groan. She stood by the window, watching the endless stream of traffic, wearing only his open uniform shirt. "The Major gave us the access codes to the secondary logistics database. The comms officer confirmed the encrypted channel de Sol uses for his private communications." She turned, a predatory smirk on her lips. "But they're also traitors, and our mission is to root out traitors and take everything they have." Kael stood and walked over to her. He traced a finger along the gold filigree on the high collar of the shirt, then lower, his touch leaving a trail of heat on her skin. "Our mission is multifaceted. Root out traitors for the ISB. Create vacancies for Crimson Dawn. Get rich. And survive." His hand cupped her cheek, his thumb brushing her lower lip. "You were fucking magnificent today. The way you handled Selk. He's probably in his quarters right now, jerking off to the memory of you putting him in his place." Zara leaned into his touch, her eyes fluttering closed for a moment. "He said my presence was a distraction to the men. I informed him that if his men were so easily distracted from their duty by a competent officer, perhaps their tiny brains belonged in a jar, not guarding a strategic shipyard." She opened her eyes, a fierce, carnal pride in them. He looked like he was going to shit his pants. Kael's smile was pure, wicked hunger. "I love watching you work." He kissed her deeply, a claiming gesture that tasted of whiskey and violence. It was less a kiss and more a promise of possession. When they parted, both were breathing heavily. The chemistry between them was a live wire, forged in blood and sealed in the dark, fueled by shared power and peril. It was their anchor and their fucking rocket fuel. "Business first," Zara breathed, her own hands working at the fastenings of his trousers. Kira's contacts. The first was a Duros named Ven, who ran a parts dealership and a lucrative side business in glitteril distribution in the covert of Blue Sector. Meeting him in a back room smelling of grease, ozone, and spilled spice, they found a shrewd businessman with no love for the Empire, but a deep, abiding love for credits and premium narcotics. "The governor is a sentimental fool," Ven hissed, his large red eyes gleaming in the dim light as he cut a line of crimson dust on a stained metal table. "He thinks he can gently guide Corellia back to some imagined independence. He funnels scraps to partisans, slows production. It's bad for fucking business. Uncertainty is." He snorted the line with a sharp inhale, then leaned forward, pupils dilated. "The new supervisors, the ones your purge will install, they will be more pragmatic, yes? Open to streamlined procurement, and maybe looking the other way at certain chemical imports?" "Crimson Dawn values pragmatic partners," Kael said, his voice neutral, not touching the offered dust. "Provided the flow of information, and a percentage of the profits, is reciprocal." The deal was struck. Ven would provide detailed manifests of all materials slipping through Dasol's shadow network. In return, once the new administration was in place, he'd have exclusive, non-competitive contracts and a protected monopoly on the sector's spice trade. The second contact was Mira, a human woman who operated a network of safe houses for displaced persons, a mix of political refugees and those simply hiding from imperial debt collectors. Kira's note simply said, "She saved my life once. She can get you anything that isn't bolted down, or anyone who is." Mira was wary, her eyes haunted. She looked at Zara's ISB uniform with undisguised hatred, until Zara mentioned Kira's name and showed the coded ring she'd been given. The woman's posture changed, softening into a weary grief. Kira made it out, Mira whispered, taking a long drag from a hand-rolled cigarra. Good. What do you sick fucks need? Access, Zara said, ignoring the insult. To the underlevels. To people who see things but aren't seen. And maybe a few people who need to disappear quietly. Mira provided maps of maintenance tunnels that ran beneath the governor's complex, and the name of a sanitation supervisor whose loyalty was to credits, not causes. She also slid a data chip across the table. Names of 3 low-level comptrollers who've been embezzling. They'll do anything to stay out of an imperial labor camp. Even rat on their boss. The final contact was the most valuable. Torek, a former Corellian Engineering Corporation foreman, now a mid-level imperial production manager. Burly, with grease permanently etched into his hands and a flask of something strong on his hip, he met them in the echoing cavern of an idle dry dock. Desol's not just skimming, Torek grunted, dispensing with pleasantries. He's sabotaging. Subtle things. Calibrations off by a micron. Power couplings installed with a weak alloy. Ships pass initial tests, but they'll fail in a year. He's building a fleet of time bombs for the Empire. He took a swig from his flask and spat. I fought for the Republic too. But this gets my crews blamed. Gets people killed in deep space. It's cowardly, sloppy shit. You have proof? Kael asked. Torek handed over a data chip. Sensor logs. Material analysis. It's all there. He routes the faulty parts through a shell corporation called Kessel's Reach. The head of it is a Twi'lek named Lyssa. She's his mistress and his bag woman. He gave a crude, knowing grin. Spends more time on her knees than at her desk, if you catch my meaning. She's also the one who liaises with Guerrera's people. You find her, you find the direct link. The pieces snap together. With Torek's evidence and Ven's manifests, they built an incontrovertible case. But they didn't file it. Not yet. Instead, Zara and Kael used their ISB authority to summon Lyssa for a routine audit of her corporation's licensing. She arrived in their office, a stunning Twi'lek with an air of entitled arrogance, dressed in expensive, tight-fitting clothes that left little to the imagination, confident in her protector's power. Zara led the interrogation, her voice like polished ice. Your shipments of boronate alloy to the Coronet West shipyard, Miss Lyssa. The spec calls for grade A. Your invoices say grade A. The material testing, she tapped a data pad, shows grade C, with a brittle impurity rate of 8%. Explain the fucking discrepancy. Lyssa's arrogance faltered. She crossed her legs slowly, a calculated gesture. A supplier error. We'll rectify it. A supplier error that has occurred across 17 separate shipments over 8 months? Kael chimed in, not looking up from cleaning his fingernails with a vibro knife. And the same supplier, curiously, also handles donations to several charitable organizations on Onderon. Organizations known to suck off partisan fighters. The Twi'lek's Leku twitched. I don't know what you're implying. We're implying treason, Zara said flatly, standing and circling the desk like a shark. Material support to terrorists. Sabotage of Imperial military assets. Crimes punishable by a slow, painful death. She stopped in front of Lyssa, leaning down, her face inches away. Your sugar daddy, the governor, can't protect you from this. In fact, his own neck is in the noose. But you have a choice. Lyssa's eyes widened with genuine fear. What choice? You give us everything. Holocom codes, meeting locations, passphrases, bank accounts. You wear a wire to your next meeting with Guerrera's contact. You become our asset. Zara's smile was cold. In return, you live. You might even keep some of the credits to buy yourself a new life, far away from this shithole. It was a brutal, pragmatic offer. The alternative was an ISB torture chamber, where they'd break her mind and body before the public execution. Lyssa, for all her bravado, was not a zealot. She was an opportunist used to trading on her looks and connections. Faced with pure, institutionalized menace, she broke within the hour. 2 nights later, guided by Mira's maps, Zara and Kael descended into the underlevels. They wore black combat gear, their Crimson Dawn insignia hidden, but their lightsabers accessible. The tunnels reeked of decay, stale water, and the faint, sweet chemical smell of a spice den nearby. In a grimy sub-basement, they watched from a rusted gantry as Lyssa, wired and trembling, met with a hulking cage warrior, a known lieutenant of Saw Gerrera. The exchange of data chips and cred sticks was recorded by a tiny holocam drone. They had it all. The proof, the conspirators, the method. As the Kaj turned to leave, Kael looked at Zara. A silent communication passed between them. Lyssa had served her purpose. But she was a loose end, a witness to their methods. And the KJ warrior was a prize. His capture would be a major coup for their ISB records. Zara gave a slight nod, her eyes hard. Kael dropped from the gantry, landing silently behind the cage. The warrior spun, a vibro-axe appearing in his hands. He never got to swing it. Kael's hand shot out, and a focused, controlled fork of Sith lightning, no longer wild, but a precise spear of actinic energy, lanced out, striking the axe. The weapon superheated instantly, burning the cage's hands. He roared in pain, the sound cut short as Zara dropped behind him. Her vibro-shiv, serrated and cruel, didn't slide. It tore between his ribs, grating on bone before finding his heart. He died with a wet, choking gurgle, his life bleeding out onto the filthy floor. Lissa screamed, the sound echoing in the damp chamber. Zara turned to her, her golden eyes pitiless in the gloom, flecked with the cage's blood. "You chose to live," Zara said softly, almost kindly as she raised her blaster, a modified, snub-nosed model with a crystalline power pack that glowed with a malevolent light. "Please, I did everything you asked," Lissa sobbed, backing against a slimy wall. "I know," Zara said. "And now I'm asking for one more thing. Your silence." PFF'd. A single bolt between the eyes. She fell beside the cage, a final, surprised expression frozen on her pretty face. "Clean," Kael said, checking the bodies. He retrieved the exchange data chips. Guerrera's plans for the ion disruptor. A bonus for Kira. He wiped his blade on the cage's tunic. The next morning, they filed their official report to ISB High Command, attaching the damning evidence. They recommended immediate, overwhelming force to prevent a localized rebellion. The response was swift. Within hours, the sky over Coronet City darkened with the wedge-shaped shadow of an Imperial I-class Star Destroyer, the ISD Judicator. It hung in low orbit, a silent, brutal threat. 10 full companies of stormtroopers from the 501th, a deliberate symbolic choice, descended in dropships, along with a full contingent of ISB arrest officers. Zara and Kael stood on the landing platform of the governor's complex as the hammer fell. Governor de Sol was taken from his office in binders, his face a mask of defiant despair. Colonel Selk and over 24 officers and officials identified as sympathizers or accomplices were rounded up. The operation was clinical, brutal, and total. As de Sol was marched past them, he stopped, his eyes finding Zara. You are not what you seem," he spat, blood on his lip from a trooper's rifle butt. Zara stepped close, her voice for his ears only, a whisper of pure malice. "The Republic was a naive dream that died screaming in a temple, Governor. The Empire is a rotting corpse. And Crimson Dawn is the fucking maggot that's going to eat it from the inside out." She saw the confusion, then dawning horror in his eyes before he was shoved roughly into a transport. In the ensuing chaos, as loyalist Imperial forces scrambled to fill the power vacuum, Zara and Kael were everywhere. They advised the new, hastily promoted governor, a career bureaucrat with no backbone and a taste for the unethical variety of female Twi'lek pleasure slaves they'd conveniently discovered. They suggested appointments for key positions, each one a contact of Ven's or a person whose file had been subtly flagged by Crimson Dawn slicers. By the time the Judicator left orbit, Corellia's Imperial administration was still loyal to the Empire on paper, but its veins now carried the shadowy, corrupting influence of the Dawn. Their final night on Corellia, they stood on the balcony of their apartment, watching the shipyard fires burn against the night sky. The air smelled of victory, ozone, and the distant, acrid scent of blaster fire from the ongoing pacification. "We did it," Kael said, leaning on the railing, a bottle of expensive brandy in his hand. "ISB will give us commendations. Crimson Dawn will owe us a fortune. Ven's first spice shipment is already being overlooked by our new portmaster." He took a swig and looked at her, his eyes dark and hungry. "And we are God's damned unstoppable." Zara moved behind him, wrapping her arms around his waist, resting her chin on his shoulder. She took the bottle from his hand and drank deeply. "We're ghosts in the machine," she murmured, her breath hot against his ear. "We make the lights flicker and blame it on the wiring." She turned him to face her, her hands sliding up to cradle his face, her thumbs tracing his jawline. "And we have each other. In this galaxy of lies and blood and shit, that's the only truth that fucking matters." Their kiss this time was slower, deeper, a celebration of power seized and secrets kept, tasting of brandy and the metallic tang of Corellian air. It was a promise of a future they were carving from the carcasses of empires with knives, blasters, and sheer, ruthless will. Below them, Corellia hummed with oblivious industry, unaware that its new masters were not in the governor's chair, but in the shadows behind it, their loyalty a tripartite knot of survival, ambition, and a dark, consuming, profane love. The game continued. The stakes were higher. And as their shuttle lifted off Corellia, bound for Coruscant and debriefing, Zara knew the whispers in the Force were no longer just screams of the past. They were the seductive, whispering promises of the dark future they were building. One purge, one betrayal, one brutal fucking objective at a time. Seal. To be continued. If you enjoyed the audio story, please like and subscribe to immerse yourself further in Zara and Kael's journey. Remember, if there are more viewers and new ones, the story will be released sooner. If the number of viewers remains the same, the release pace will be slow, and once again, a special thanks to our new viewers tuning in. You are the reason for a speedy release. I appreciate the support and interest in Zara and Kael's journey.